Hello everybody, this is Bo Zilovic. The topic of my dissertation is Psychological Safety Study of Contingent and Tenured Faculty in Higher Education. In this presentation, we'll go over the problem in practice, research questions, theoretical framework, conceptual framework, and how will this dissertation add to existing literature. Before we begin, it's important to mention this American Federation of Teachers 2020 report. American Federation of Teachers surveyed 3,076 participants and found out that nearly one-third of contingent faculty earn less than $25,000 a year, placing them below the federal poverty guideline for a family of four. 3 out of 4 contingent faculty members' employment is only guaranteed term to term. There's no job security. 37% said they cannot imagine how they'll retire. But perhaps the most disturbing figure is the one tied to food security, or shall we say food insecurity. 26% of participants said that they had problems accessing adequate food or opted to reduce the quality of food they eat to get by. 6% reported they had to eat less to get by in the last year. Now, given that contingent faculty represents 75% of all faculty in American higher education, these findings are quite disturbing. So what is the problem? Well, the problem is that contingent faculty may not feel the same level of psychological safety as their tenured colleagues in their organizations, as their institutions do not invest in them in the way that they do for tenured faculty, nor do they have much voice in the details of their service. Psychological safety is going to be analyzed in detail in the written component of this dissertation, but it's important to mention that psychologically safe environments may produce positive workplace outcomes such as higher levels of engagement, creativity, learning, and innovation, which are important factors in the success of any organization, including higher ed. There are 3 research questions for this study. First, and the main research question is, what differences exist in the perception of psychological safety between contingent and tenured faculty in higher education? Going through the literature, it became obvious that concept of interpersonal relationships in terms of supportiveness, acceptance, and mutuality plays a role in the overall perception of psychological safety within organizations. In addition to interpersonal relationships, relationships to administration were also found to play a role as well. Therefore, these concepts were broken down into 2 additional research questions for this study. Research question 2 states, how do contingent and tenured faculty differ in perceptions of the supportiveness, acceptance, and mutuality of their interpersonal relationships in their respective institutions? And research question 3 states, how do contingent and tenured faculty differ in perceptions of inclusiveness, integrity, and administration trust in their respective institutions? The theoretical framework for the study is provided by the Adams's equity theory. The equity theory concludes that employees seek to maintain equity between the inputs that they bring to a job and the outcomes that they receive from it against the perceived inputs and outcomes of others. Maslow identifies a hierarchy of needs, beginning with physiological needs and then moving on to safety, love, and esteem needs. So this concept of safety is being expanded really into psychological safety. So what is psychological safety? Well, it is the degree to which people view the work environment as conducive to interpersonally risky behaviors, such as speaking up without fear or repercussions, or asking for help without fear or being perceived incompetent or weak. So here we have a conceptual framework. We see that Maslow's theory of needs and Adams' equity theory provide support to the concept of psychological safety for this study. This concept of psychological safety for this study is broken down among 3 different research questions. The main research question will be dealing with some seminal research findings about psychological safety, and then those findings will be operationalized through measurable behaviors. So we will be operationalizing some of the concepts found in the seminal research on psychological safety into survey questions, which will enable us to measure perception of psychological safety. So these behaviors in the seminal research study were identified as the handling of mistakes, problems, and risks, whether people are rejected for being different, is it easy to ask for the help, if people deliberately undermine each other, whether there's equality in contributions, and can anyone speak up regardless of their rank. The second research question, we will be dealing with the concept of interpersonal relationships. This concept of interpersonal relationships was broken down into three additional concepts of supportiveness, acceptance, and mutuality. Supportiveness will be measured and operationalized through the questions such as my colleagues encourage my creativity. Acceptance will be operationalized through survey questions such as my colleagues are soliciting input from me. Mutuality will be operationalized with the questions such as how do faculty relate to one another. The relationship to administration concept will be broken down into three additional concepts of inclusiveness, trust, and integrity, which will then be operationalized through the research questions such as openness to feedback. Trust will be operationalized with a question such as I can speak honestly about my concerns, and integrity will be operationalized with a question such as administration shows consistency of words and action. So for the purpose of this research study, the survey questions addressing the three dissertation questions will be mutually exclusive. They are all tied to the concept of psychological safety, but for the purpose of this dissertation, the survey questions will be mutually exclusive. So how will this dissertation add to the literature? Well, as you saw in the American Federation of Teachers report, there is a big discrepancy in status between contingent and tenured faculty in economic terms. So there's really an abundance of research studies out there that are dealing with the economic differences of contingent and tenured faculty. But this study will be unique in terms that it will address non-economic differences. This non-economic differences research study will help to reveal, if there are differences not only in the economic terms, but also in terms of psychological safety, interpersonal relationships, and relationships to the administration. It is highly unlikely that the federal government will close the investment gap that has occurred since the recession. You see, before the pandemic begun, it would have taken federal and state investment of an additional $15 billion in higher education funding over 2 years to get back to pre-recession levels of public investment in higher education. So it is highly unlikely, in my opinion, that the federal government will close this gap in funding. So this research study is hoping to shed a light on the differences in psychological safety for the purpose of addressing policies and procedures and non-economic factors that influence the status and the psychological safety of not only contingent faculty but all faculty. Currently, there are existing studies in psychological safety, but from what I found, they have been conducted in healthcare organizations, corporate sector, and middle schools, but there are currently no studies of psychological safety in higher education. Therefore, this dissertation is looking to add to the body of literature of psychological safety, adding higher education to that list, in addition to exploring non-economic differences between contingent and tenured faculty. The anticipated results for the study, well, this research will potentially provide higher education faculty and administration with the information necessary to address current organizational culture, as well as develop policies and procedures to enhance a psychologically safe working environment for all faculty, regardless of their role. This study is also hoping to strengthen the higher education organizations for global challenges, increase the organizational development, and offer opportunities to all faculty regardless of their rank. The research method for the study will be quantitative cross-sectional. The quantitative method was selected because it will allow us to quantify perceptions and feelings of psychological safety on a 6-point Likert scale. The sample is given on this slide, as you can see. So this Likert scale will allow us to collect data, and we would be able to use that data to compare statistically the perceptions of psychological safety, interpersonal relationships, and relationships to administration between contingent and tenured faculty. The participants will be contingent and tenured faculty from 2 community colleges and 2 four-year institutions from New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Besides their faculty status, the participants will also be asked to provide basic demographic information such as gender, ethnicity, and age. So this is my final slide indicating the variables for this study for which the hypothesis will be formed. So we have an independent variable, which is faculty rank, and dependent variable, that is the perception of psychological safety, perception of supportiveness, acceptance, and mutuality in interpersonal relationships, and finally, the perception of administration inclusiveness, integrity, and trust. Thank you for reviewing my presentation. I really appreciate it. I wish everyone good luck with their dissertations. Stay strong and work hard. Thank you and have a good night.